The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Marcus wiped his sweaty brow with the back of his sleeve, his janitor's uniform already damp from hours of mopping floors in the towering corporate building. His stomach growled audibly, echoing through the empty hallway, but he pushed the hunger aside. In his worn backpack sat a single sandwich, peanut butter and jelly on day-old bread, carefully wrapped in a napkin. It wasn't much, but it was all he had left after splitting his meager grocery budget between his 7-year-old daughter Emma's school lunch money and the utilities that kept their small apartment livable. Marcus had learned to navigate life as a single father after his wife Sarah passed away 3 years ago, leaving him to raise Emma alone on a janitor's salary that barely covered rent, let alone the mounting medical bills from Sarah's cancer treatment. Every dollar mattered, every meal was planned, and every sacrifice was made with Emma's bright smile in mind. She was his world, his reason for getting up at 4 a.m. to clean office buildings before his day's shift at the mall, his motivation to keep going when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. Tonight was no different, except for the elderly couple huddled on the bench outside the building's entrance. Marcus had noticed them during his evening rounds, the woman, probably in her 70s, clutching a thin shawl around her shoulders while her husband rubbed his hands together for warmth. Their clothes were clean but worn, the kind of careful maintenance that spoke of pride despite circumstances. A small cardboard sign leaned against the woman's legs, "Anything helps." God bless. Marcus slowed his pace as he approached the glass doors, watching the couple through the reflection. The woman's shoulders shook slightly, whether from cold or something deeper, he couldn't tell. Her husband whispered something in her ear, and she managed a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. They reminded Marcus of his own parents, who had worked their entire lives only to lose everything when his father's factory closed and his mother's arthritis made work impossible. The sandwich in his backpack seemed to grow heavier with each step. Emma had already eaten dinner, mac and cheese from a box, her favorite, and wouldn't expect anything until breakfast. But this sandwich was his dinner, his fuel for the long night ahead of cleaning 3 more buildings before heading home to catch a few hours of sleep before Emma woke up for school. Marcus paused at the door, his reflection staring back at him in the glass. He thought about Emma's words from that morning as he'd helped her with her shoelaces. "Daddy, Mrs. Rodriguez says we should always help people who are sad. It makes God happy." At 6 years old, Emma possessed a wisdom that sometimes took his breath away, a compassion that had somehow survived despite their struggles. Without allowing himself to overthink it, Marcus turned around and walked back to the couple. His footsteps echoed in the quiet evening air, causing both of them to look up with a mixture of hope and wariness. The woman's eyes were a pale blue, watery but kind, while her husband's weathered face spoke of a lifetime of hard work. "Excuse me," Marcus said softly, reaching into his backpack. "I don't have much, but I thought you might be hungry." He pulled out the sandwich, still warm from being close to his body, and extended it toward them. The woman's eyes filled with tears immediately. "Oh, honey, we couldn't take your food. You work so hard. I've seen you cleaning these buildings every night." "Please," Marcus insisted, pressing the sandwich gently into her hands. "My daughter always tells me that sharing is caring, and she's usually right about these things." He managed a smile despite the growing ache in his stomach. "Besides, looks like you two could use it more than I can tonight." The husband reached out with a trembling hand to touch Marcus's arm. "Son, you don't know what this means to us. We've been on hard times since I lost my job, and we're too proud to ask our kids for help. They have their own families to worry about." Marcus knelt down beside them, his voice gentle. "We all need help sometimes, sir. There's no shame in that. I've been there myself." He thought of the food bank visits, the times he'd swallowed his pride to ask for assistance, the nights he'd gone hungry so Emma could have seconds. The only shame would be in not helping each other when we can. What Marcus didn't notice was the figure watching from the 20th floor of the building above, silhouetted against the office lights. Robert Chen, CEO of Chen Industries, had been working late again, a habit that had cost him his marriage but had built his company into a Fortune 500 corporation. He'd been looking out the window, taking a break from reviewing quarterly reports, when he spotted the interaction below. Robert had been searching for weeks for someone to head his new community outreach program, someone who understood struggle, someone whose actions aligned with the company's stated values of compassion and integrity. He'd interviewed dozens of candidates with impressive resumes and polished presentations, but none had demonstrated the quiet character he witnessed in the scene unfolding below. As Marcus walked away, heading toward his next building, the elderly couple shared the sandwich with reverent gratitude. Robert pulled out his phone and made a call to his head of security. "I need you to get me information on the janitor who was just outside our building, the one with the dark uniform. I want to know everything about him by morning." The next evening, Marcus was surprised to find a message waiting for him at the security desk. The guard handed him an envelope with his name written in elegant script. Inside was a letter requesting his presence at a meeting the following day with the CEO of Chen Industries. Marcus read it 3 times, certain there had been some mistake. "Emma, baby, do you think Daddy could be in trouble at work?" he asked his daughter as she colored at their small kitchen table. Emma looked up with her big brown eyes, so much like her mother's. "Did you do something bad, Daddy?" "No, sweetheart, I just helped some people who were hungry." Emma nodded sagely, returning to her coloring. "Then you can't be in trouble. Good helpers don't get in trouble." The meeting the next day changed everything. Robert Chen sat across from Marcus in his spacious office, having learned about the single father's situation through his background check. Marcus's story was one of quiet dignity, a man who'd worked multiple jobs to keep his family afloat, who'd never missed a rent payment despite overwhelming odds, who'd volunteered at Emma's school despite his exhausting schedule. "Mr. Johnson," Robert began, "I witnessed something last night that reminded me why I started this company in the first place. Before I built this empire, I was homeless for 6 months, sleeping in shelters and wondering where my next meal would come from. Success made me forget that experience, but watching you share your dinner with strangers brought it all back." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in the leather chair. "Sir, I just did what anyone would do." "That's where you're wrong," Robert said with a slight smile. "I've been looking for someone to head our new community outreach division, someone who understands what it means to struggle, someone whose first instinct is to help others even when they have little to give themselves. The position comes with a salary of $85,000 a year, full benefits, and the opportunity to make a real difference in people's lives." The numbers didn't compute at first. Marcus had never made more than $25,000 in his best year. He thought of Emma, of the apartment with the leaky faucet he couldn't afford to fix, of the dreams he'd put aside to focus on survival. "Mr. Chen, I don't have a college degree. I don't have experience in corporate programs. I'm just a janitor who tries to do right by his daughter." Robert leaned forward. "You have something more valuable than any degree, character. You have the life experience to understand our target community, and you've demonstrated the kind of heart this program needs to succeed. We can teach you the business skills, but we can't teach someone to care the way you do." 6 months later, Marcus stood in his new office, watching Emma play in the company's on-site daycare center through the window. The community outreach program had already provided meals for over 500 families, job training for 150 unemployed workers, and emergency assistance for dozens of families facing eviction. The elderly couple he'd met that night, Harold and Dorothy Martinez, had become the program's first success story, with Harold finding part-time work through the job placement service and Dorothy volunteering at the community center. Emma ran up to him after daycare, her backpack bouncing against her small frame. "Daddy, Mrs. Chen says you're a hero because you help people." Marcus knelt down to Emma's level, smoothing her hair. "We're all heroes when we help each other, baby girl. That's what Mommy always said, and that's what we're going to keep doing." As they walked home together, Marcus reflected on how a single moment of kindness had transformed their lives. But more than the job, more than the financial security, what mattered most was that Emma would grow up in a world where she'd learned that compassion wasn't just a nice idea, it was a way of life that could change everything. The sandwich had cost him nothing more than his dinner, but it had fed his soul in ways he was only beginning to understand. Sometimes the smallest acts of love created the biggest miracles, rippling outward in ways that touched lives far beyond what the heart could imagine. And in a world that often felt cold and disconnected, Marcus had learned that humanity's greatest strength lay not in what people could take, but in what they chose to give.